He's still going on. According to my link, Rabbi Levin's still going on. All right, 1 second. Oh, there we go. There we go.
Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of the Fathers, live from Israel with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Now, today's a special day because this is our first live broadcast to our new International Noahide Network Roku station. So this is being streamed live onto the television. For those watching on Roku, I want to welcome you. This is one of our live weekly sessions, and we've been streaming the first dozen or so episodes of Pirkei Avos with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. You may have noticed the bunnies walking across the screen, but this is our current look. We try to update it every year or so to try to keep things fresh, and we're just overjoyed that the light of Torah keeps shining out of the nation of Israel, and Rabbi Coffman's just a joy to be with, always sharing with us the ethics of the Father and the depth of Torah on the matter. So I believe we're holding on chapter 2, Mishnah 6. I think we've got, part 13 today, Rabbi?
That is true. Always a pleasure to be here. We'll see if there's a part 14. We'll see how far we get, and we'll see how strong this Roku network is going to be. See if it can actually handle me, and there won't be any, there won't be any issues.
Glitches, yeah. It's got to be Coffman-proof.
As they say, you just, never know. And as everyone says, when I come on, you better make sure it's Coffman-proof, right?
Too hot to handle.
We are right, chapter 2, Mishnah 6, part 13. We are still speaking about somebody who's an impatient person, can't teach. So we spoke all about, teachers and, what patience is, etc., and about anger, right? We spoke about it, and we're going to speak about anger actually in a little bit as well. Another little aspect about anger that probably scare the wits out of everybody, but that's part of the game over here because it's ethics, right? That's what we do. We speak about ethics. Hopefully we can live up to what the rabbis want from us, what the Torah wants from us. So a teacher, as we mentioned, 100% has to have patience. So the students will not be embarrassed, right? There's nothing worse than a student who feels they're going to be ridiculed, either by the teachers or by others. Now, I can tell you from personal experience, many years ago when I was first learning,
right,
and I was learning in a certain type of yeshiva, and so anytime somebody said something, there were vultures waiting to pick the person apart. Now, the question is, are they picking them apart because what they're saying isn't true and they want to get to the truth?
Just being critical.
Or are they picking them apart because they want to make themselves look better?
Right.
In other words, my dead grandmother could have given a better explanation than that, right? Obviously, you're not allowed to make fun of someone. You're not allowed to put them down. But what's the
CFL
problem? If these vultures come along, right, they want to rip you to shreds in order to make themselves look better, that's not Torah, right? That's first of all, that's forbidden. Why is it forbidden? Because if you tell me they're interested in getting to the truth and they'll do whatever it takes to get to the truth, okay. So if they point out a person, they're going in the wrong direction, they don't have the right explanation. Now, they could be doing it for the sake of heaven. They're not doing it to make fun. They want to say, this is not what it says. This is not what it means. But if they're doing it because they have a chip on their shoulder, and they're doing it because they want to make themselves look better, they want to show, I know the answer. So in order for me to show I know the answer, I'm going to put you down. That is a Torah prohibition. right? That you're certainly not allowed to do. So what's going to happen in that case? Someone knows if they're not sure, they may come up with the wrong answer. Why are they going to say anything? Because they know they're going to get shot down. Right now, if you're getting shot down because you're wrong, okay, you got to be man enough or woman enough to say, okay, I'm wrong, right? But if you're being shot down, even if you are wrong, right, but you get put in your place, and it's
Hammered.
not certainly done for the sake of heaven, you're never going to sit, you're never going to sit there and want to give your opinion. Why in the world would you want to give your opinion?
Yeah, to get
Right?
whacked upside
That's by other students.
Right.
What about the teacher himself? If the teacher comes along and shoots you down and he says, you idiot, how could you come up with such an explanation? Maybe what it sounds like is what a person is saying, maybe heretical. But the reality is maybe what they're asking, let's just flush this out for a second. Maybe what they're asking is a question that they have. Right? In other words, they're not asking it to say, hey, where was God in the Holocaust? And I always ask that, because we're right after, the fast of the 9th of Av. That's why we didn't do a class last week. Right? So a person says, hey, where was God during the Holocaust? So the answer is, well, God's where he always was. It always is. So what's the question? No, it's just a question I make rabbis fidget. Right? The question I just sort of hit them with, I got a great book. Right? It's called Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust. Unbelievable stories about intestinal fortitude. People survive questions they ask, all kinds of things. You want to read it? It's like, no. Why not? It's just a question I asked to make rabbis fidget. Great. Next. Right? So if a person asks a question and it's a legitimate question, they deserve a legitimate answer.
For sure.
Right? Now, if let's say the teacher thinks they're just saying it to cut class time, get into this philosophical discussion, and they're really wasting time.
Hear their own voice.
Okay, that might be a different issue. But the person, as we mentioned many times, the person himself has to be told there's an answer. It might be that we're not going to answer it now. I'll speak to you about another time. We'll set up a class for it, whatever it is. But if the person gets blown off enough times, and he says, no, we're not going to discuss this now. No, we're not going to, what kind of question is that? Whatever, they just blow it off. Then what does the person think? What does the student think? They think there are no answers. And they say, see, the Torah has no answers. I got good questions. I'm not saying it's not a legitimate question, right? The question is why they're asking the question is a different issue, right? But essentially, it's a good question. So if it's a good question, why are you going to blow them off? Because if you blow them off, a person's going to say after a few times, see, they're just blowing me off. Torah doesn't have any answers. But we're understanding today that, or let's say better, teachers are understanding today that they cannot do that. No, because
it doesn't
if
work.
They do that,
backfires.
The kids are going to say, I don't have a right to ask a question. I don't have a right to ask a deep question, right? And there are a lot of deep questions out there. Why do the righteous suffer? Right? What about reincarnation? What about, all kinds of things, that people ask that are legitimate questions. Now, does that mean you're going to, every time someone asks a question like that, you're going to take away from class time to answer? That's a different issue. Because you have to cover a certain amount of ground. You can't just get in esoteric conversations. Because many people in my classes would say, wow, we go in so much detail. Laws of blessings, laws of Shabbos. Let's talk about the end of days. Isn't that the famous question? Non-Jews coming out of Christianity want to know what's going to be in the end of days. And if I had that answer, I wouldn't tell you. Ha ha. No, the end, right? Whoever knows ain't talking, right? But it's a good topic. It's an interesting topic. That's why I always say I'll take questions at the end that have nothing to do with my class, because if I take a question in the middle, they'll take me too long to answer. I'll never finish, right? Sure. And people will complain. It'll take me 5,000 years to finish conversion, right? That wouldn't make any sense, but doesn't mean it's not a good question. People coming out of Christianity or paganism, what are they taught? Not to ask questions. We love questions. Obviously, the questions should be clean. The question should be sincere, yes. etc. Not just to waste someone's time, and not just to get another opinion. With one of my pet peeves, and someone's going to say, hey, what's the answer to this question? You give an answer and say, hey, but other rabbis disagree. So why are you asking me? you asked me specifically for my opinion. So I'm going to give you my opinion. Don't tell me 20 people disagree. Okay. So what if 20 people disagree? Right? But you're not rabbi shopping. That's forbidden. We've spoken about that also.
Yes.
My Rebbe once told me something. And I said, by the way, is there anyone else who holds such a thing except for you? And he's like, what? I said it's not good enough for you? He's like, not good enough for you. Right? So obviously, I'm kind of a little bit of a hard nut to crack, as most people probably realize. Right? But the point is that a teacher themselves have a tremendous obligation not to embarrass a student. Right? We told the story before of a teacher that embarrassed somebody, and the only way the person would accept, he went against Judaism, became a secular Jew, because that was one of the things that led him, to go off, is because he got embarrassed in public. So he told his Rebbe, he said, listen, I'll accept your apology on one condition. You have to gather the entire class together and go back to the school where you taught in that same classroom and apologize to me in public. Now, this Rebbe lived in Israel. In order to gather everyone together, going to cost them a lot of money. But this student said, I will not forgive you unless you do this. Right? So he went to one of the Torah giants of the last generation, Rabbi Elyashiv of blessed memory, and he asked him what he should do. He said, so Rabbi Elyashiv screamed at him, and he said, I don't understand the question. You embarrass someone in public. When you embarrass someone in public, you lose your portion of the world to come. Rabbeinu Yonah says it's so severe, he holds the position that even though somebody murdered, it's one of the big three that every Jew has to give up their life for: murder, idolatry, or immorality. No matter what happens, if a non-Jew would say, I want you to kill this person, I'm going to kill you, right? You have an obligation to die, or bow down to this guy in the stick, right? Reference to JC, or short little fat guy. Mr. Buddha himself, I don't think they'll call him short little fat guy, but it's a mitzvah to make fun of idolatry anyway. So imagine someone says, God forbid, they put a gun to your head and say, bow down to fatso or die. You have to be willing to die. Right now, but if a person kills, in general, you don't lose your portion of the world to come. Comes along Rabbeinu Yonah in Shari Tshuva, in the Gate of Repentance, which I gave a whole bunch of classes on the entire book on my subscription website. Anyone interested, they can contact me about that. And the Rabbeinu Yonah says an unbelievable novelty. Rabbeinu Yonah says if you embarrass someone in public, you lose your portion of the world to come. Now, that sounds almost implausible. Why? Because when I embarrass someone, what do you do? Not me. When someone embarrasses someone, what happens? The person turns white, then they turn red, right? What does the redness represent? Right? Blood. So it's like you're spilling someone's blood. Comes along Rabbeinu Yonah, and he says, I understand if a person kills, they don't lose their portion of the world to come. But what does Rabbeinu Yonah say? We mentioned this before, but it's still very good to mention. And that is, but if you embarrass someone, which is an offshoot at best of murder, because you're not really murdering them, they turn white, they turn red. It's akin to murder. It's similar to murder in some ways. So you lose your portion of the world to come, right? So if you embarrass someone, you lose your portion of the world to come, right? So something like that, but I don't understand. If you murder someone, you don't lose your portion of the world to come. If certainly if you repent. I would say embarrassing someone also, but they have to accept your atonement, all right? They have to give you forgiveness. So Rabbeinu Yonah is telling you an unbelievable thing. He's saying murder, you don't lose your portion of the world to come. Murder is seemingly a heck of a lot worse than embarrass someone in public. And he's telling you if you embarrass someone in public, you lose your portion of the world to come. That is a huge novelty. Because if you would have said it, anyone else would have said it, would have shot you in the head. No pun intended. Doesn't make any sense. Why, if the thing that's more severe, i.e. murder itself, you have a portion of the world to come, right? Over here, you embarrass someone, not similar to murder in many ways. You lose your portion of the world to come. So Rabbi Elyashiv said, you have to go, get everybody together. And he said, what's the matter? Your portion of the world to come is not worth anything. Right? In my language, it's worth spit. You're not going to get your portion in the world to come back. He's giving you a golden opportunity. So I don't care how you get the money. I don't care if it's 2 years of your salary. You want your portion of the world to come. That's how you have to get it. That's what you have to do. He didn't even understand the question, right? So what did the person do? Exactly what he did, right? He got everybody together, flew them in, went back to the original school, got his whole class together. Cost him a pretty penny. Got his whole class together, and he apologized in front of everyone. And he accepted his apology. And that's how he got his portion of the world to come back, right? So the thing over here is someone in education has to be very, very careful you do not embarrass anyone, right? You lose your portion of the world to come. Now, what should a person do? Let's say, ask the student a question. Student's way off base, right? Student makes a mistake. So what should the teacher do? So the teacher should find the good points that the student said, and then try and build it up and say, you probably meant like this. Or maybe you meant like that. Now, they could be way off base, way, way off base. So you can say, okay, maybe you meant like this. It gets the student to think a little bit. And then he points them in the right direction, right? Something like that's going to give the person a tremendous amount of self-esteem instead of just saying, no, you're wrong, go in a different direction. You're way off base. Here, they're helping them make the right decision, right? Giving them proper understanding. So many great rabbis of the previous generation were very big in finding good points the students made. What does that do? Builds them in self-esteem, right? Builds their self-esteem, puts them in the right direction. What is one of the biggest flaws, or I shouldn't say flaws, wrong word. What is one of the biggest things that are difficult for a person in this generation? Right? Even if they grow up as an Orthodox Jew, what's one of their weak points? And that is self-esteem. Probably one of the biggest weak points, because we're going to say, come on, we're learning something that was brought down 2,000 years ago. We don't come up to their toenails of the rabbis and the great rabbis of our generation and previous generations. They feel really small, right? In my language, it's, an infinitesimally small speck of cosmic dust, right? Imagine I live in a small town, right? In a city, in a state, in a country, on a continent, on a planet, in a galaxy. We're getting much smaller. So a person's going to say, what I think really matters, what I do really matters. Now, everybody knows. Well, I guess if you don't, you'll know now, right? And that's why we're live on the Roku channel now, to make people understand what we do absolutely matters, right? The Nefesh HaChaim, Rav Chaim of Volozhin, the famous rabbi of Volozhin, started the Volozhin Yeshiva, the famous student of the Vilna Gaon, Rav Elijah Vilna, more than 250 years ago. In his epic work, Nefesh HaChaim, the soul of life, literally, most people learn the fourth gate. It's all about the importance of learning Torah. Everything else in between, a lot of it has to do with Kabbalah. But at the beginning, this is one of the first things he says, is that a person should never, ever think what I do doesn't matter, right? And how it can affect spiritual world, just like Adam and Eve, right? People think, okay, it's one event, change the course of history. Chomp, 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 whatever it was that they ate from the tree of knowledge. Everybody holds it wasn't an apple, right? They hold it might have been a fig, might have been a grape, might have been wheat, maybe all kinds of things. In the whole laundry list, of things that could have been, nobody says it's an apple. So where did an apple come from? Don't know, right? That'd be one of the greater mysteries, in the world, besides who was Casper the Friendly Ghost before he died. But that we already know because they made a movie in the 80s, or the 80s or 90s, I don't remember exactly. Anyway, the point being, is that a person should never think what I do doesn't matter. Adam and Eve eat from the tree. God says, okay, everyone out of the pool, they can't eat from the tree of life. God throws them out of the Garden of Eden. But what did that do? Says Rav Chaim of Volozhin, one event brought death to the world, right? That's pretty bad. So when a person dies, first person they're going to see, or soul, whatever, is going to be Adam himself. And they're going to say, because of you, I have to go through death. That's part of the atonement process. Adam nods his head, and the person goes on wherever they go. But even more than that, that Adam and Eve ate from the tree, they threw all the spiritual worlds in the flux. So what are we doing? We're trying to bring the world to where it was before Adam and Eve ate from the tree. There's only one other time in history that was the case. When was that? That was at Matan Torah, when God gave the Torah to the Jewish people. They were on that level before Adam and Eve ate from the tree. So comes along Mr. S, the evil inclination, the angel of death, whatever you want to call him. He says, hey, we can't go back to this. I'm going to die. I'm not going to have any purpose in life. So what did he do? He shows the picture of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Medrash says, shows the picture of Moshe Rabbeinu in a coffin. And they all think he died because he didn't come back. They made a mistake when he was supposed to come back, says the Medrash. And that's when they sinned with the golden calf. Right? That was with the story with the mixed multitude. So one event in history changed the course of history. So you're going to say, fine, that's Adam and Eve. That's other people. That's way back. What about me? What about my actions? Comes along the Rambam. And the Rambam says in the 13 principles of faith, God is absolute. He's got the right to reward and punish. So what does that mean? That means that if I don't do the right thing, I'm in trouble. There's always repentance. Person can always repent, right? But, the Rambam compared to Aristotle, which we don't really care about Aristotle, but Aristotle's God, according to him, can't do anything. In other words, he's like acted upon, right? By the Torah, God is not acted upon by anything. What does the Torah tell me at the beginning of Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, right? It says God created the heaven and the earth. So what was before that? So you might think, there was nothing before that. Not true, right? God was before that. God will be at the beginning. God will be at the end. But if you say God is at the beginning, in the beginning God is there, that means he must have had a beginning, right? Logically. He must have had a beginning. This is the beginning of duties of the heart, which nobody learns because it's all Kabbalah anyway, which I don't shy away from that. I'm still towards the end of that book, but we spoke about it at length. And it was a proof there to show that God cannot have any needs, right? In other words, if you say that's the reason, says in Duties of the Heart, that's the reason you say that God is not the first. Because if you say God is the first, that means there was something before him. And we obviously know God was there before. So what was he busy doing? Right? What was he busy doing before he created this world? So the Medrash says, busy creating, destroying other worlds. Right? That's, maybe that's what you have with dinosaurs. They died out or whatever, or maybe they died out by the flood. Whatever the case is, right? That's your thing over there. We won't get into that now because we'll digress here. But the point is that God is busy building and destroying worlds. He doesn't have a beginning, doesn't have an end, right? But a person will think, okay, so what? So if I do this, you think really God cares, right? If I rip toilet paper on the Sabbath, right, for Jews, right? Any Jews watching this should be watching now, right? But it doesn't apply to a non-Jew because non-Jews don't have Shabbos anyway in general. So that being the case, if I rip toilet paper, God really care? Well, why would he kill you? Why would you get the death penalty if not, right? So obviously our actions have meaning. And if God was a docile, good SAT word, right? If God was docile, right, and he couldn't do anything according to Aristotle, right, then why would anyone serve him? Right? In other words, there's no point to serve something that you have no repercussions for your actions. That would mean I could be in my sealed room right now, giving this class to everybody, on YouTube and on that Roku channel, right? So going live, but nobody sees me here, right? You can see me with the camera, right? But I'm here in my sealed room. So I can say, God's not going to find me. Or you're in the bathroom. God's not going to see me. Well, what are you talking about? God's everywhere, right? God's infinite. So you can't hide. So the point is, when I get up in the morning, person will say, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do the other thing. Well, that's all true, but you know what that means? That means what I do matters. That means there are repercussions for what I do, which a lot of people don't want to hear, which is too bad, right? But at the end of the day, we have obligations. So it comes on the Rambam says, of course, this is what gives meaning in life. If God couldn't affect anything, and God couldn't do anything like that docile God of Aristotle, who's going to serve him? Nobody's going to serve him. So imagine one event in history changed everything. In our own lives, events can change the future, right? The person's going to say, I know you got a question here, but now I'm on this roll. Just let me finish. So I read the introduction, which I mentioned the story before. It's also a good story. When I was engaged, it was a book called Made in Heaven. It's about marriage, and written by Rabbi Kaplan of blessed memory. And I never got past the introduction. Now you're gonna say, come on, don't guys also have to read about marriage books and what you're expected to do and all this? It's also true, right? 100%. Women should read them, men should read them, etc. But the point is, why not get past the introduction? It comes along Rabbi Kaplan, a little bit too intense for me at the time. Rabbi Kaplan says, this decision, who you're going to marry, because we're two halves of a soul. When a person gets married, right, their souls come together, right? They're two half souls. So if they're two half souls, imagine what happens when you marry the wrong person, right? I'll get to that in a second, right? But what did he say? This decision doesn't just affect you. It affects your future spouse. It affects your kids. It affects your grandkids. And I'm like, who, me? Slam the book shut. I go, that's too intense. But it's true. Because if let's say we marry the wrong person, we'll make it easy. You marry the wrong person, 60 to 70% into marriage within Judaism today. God forbid, but those are the statistics. Some places it's even higher. So now, you're a half a soul. You're supposed to marry a Jewish person. Right? Now, what happened to that other half a soul? Now, we're talking one person. I'm not talking tens of thousands. Now, imagine the matrix that God has to go through. I just heard they're making another Matrix movie. Unbelievable. Matrix 4, right? So imagine what God has to do over here. A Jew intermarries. Now, what does that mean? That means he's not marrying the right person. Now, if you tell me they convert and this and that, okay, we're going to make it easy. We're not talking about that the non-Jewish spouse converts. So what happens? They marry someone they're not supposed to. So what happened to the other half of the soul? The other half of the soul. Sounds like a Freddy Krueger movie. Go somewhere else, right? A Nightmare on Elm Street. Go somewhere else. But it's not going to be with the right person. You just messed that up because now you intermarried, right? So now all those future generations, however many kids you were supposed to have with the right person, gone. Gone. Those future souls don't exist. Right? Now, that's one person. So now, the other half of the soul also is not going to marry the right person in reality. So, what's going to happen to them? And whatever. So, we see it's a little bit complicated. The point is, that's one person. Imagine 60% of the Jewish people today are intermarried. That makes the Matrix look like child's play. You need a major supercomputer to figure out where all these souls are going to be, right? And where they're going to be in the future. And now who they're going to end up marrying. And all these other souls that are not going to come into the world, right? So now do the math. I mean, we're not going to do the math. I'm not going to embarrass myself here. But imagine you're not marrying the right person. If you don't marry the right person, you're not going to have the kids you were supposed to have. So those kids are not born. So now what does God do? What does God do with these kids that aren't going to be born? What's going to happen to their souls? They'll go somewhere else, right? But God has to keep track. This is why you need a major supercomputer. That's why the Matrix is going to be obsolete over here, because the statistics are up the gazoo, right? The things change by the second. Okay, this kid's not going to happen, right? It's not going to come into the world. This soul's not going to come into the world. So now what do I do with it? Going to go here, going to go there. But then this other soul's not going to come in. So let's say someone's going to have 2 kids, 3 kids. Imagine the havoc that it does in the spiritual world and the souls and getting fixed up and all that. That's only by one person. Multiply it 60 times that. That's more than the Matrix, right? That is more than all the hours on the Roku channel. That blows your mind. People go, oh, intermarriage, not a big deal. Well, if you look at it in spiritual terms, it's a whole different ballgame. Right now, the other side of the coin is what happens if a person marries the right person. Right? A Jew marries the person they were supposed to, and they end up getting divorced. Now, what happens if they married the right person? Now, just because the person ends up marrying the right person, that doesn't mean that everything's going to go great, everything's going to go easy, and that God put them together and everything, they could mess it up themselves. You're going to say, but they're two halves of the soul. They're meant to be together. You're right. They're absolutely meant to be together. And if they are, great. But what can happen, right? So I'll give you a parable. And the parable is, take a plant and leave it in the sun and never water it. What happens when you don't water a plant? I'll tell you, It's I wouldn't say it's not biology. It's whatever you call it, whatever plantology it's called, right? Botany. It's botany 101 or 101A. You don't water a plant, it will die. Right? Doesn't matter how much sunlight it gets, it'll die. Right? That's what's going to happen. That's exactly what's going to happen. Right? In a marriage, no difference. You can keep the laws by the letter of the law, beyond the letter of the law, all these things. If you don't work on it, it will die. Right? So God's going to say, it's not my fault. Right? It's certainly not my fault. You did this. But I put the right people together. The right people actually got together. Does that mean we can blow it? 100%. Right? That's what it means. It's not God's fault. Right? He put the seeds together. It's okay. Now, but you have to work at it. Right? Just because you're together doesn't mean, it's going to go. People make that mistake. But if I married the right person, how could this happen? So we have an evil inclination. We do things wrong. We say things. We get caught up. I mean, there are a million reasons. There are a million reasons why a person can grow apart. They could be all legit. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
The point is, it can happen. And the fact is that if it does happen, it's a tragedy. Right? It's a tragedy when anyone gets divorced. I don't think there's any question. Right? We're talking about two Jews here, not by an intermarriage. An intermarriage, it's a great thing they get divorced. Right? But in general, two Jews getting married, okay. Right? But they have to work at it. If they don't work at it, right? It's like the plant. It will die. Yeah, question.
Okay, I got a couple. I got one from me, and then there's one from somebody on the YouTube chat room. And I just wanted to say that to those watching on Roku, if you want to get involved and interact live, you can find us on the Noahide World Center social media stations on Facebook and on YouTube. So go to YouTube, the Noahide World Center, look it up, and you'll see this stream is being there. And there's loads of people from all over that join us regularly. But my question first, Rabbi, was just like you said, we should never discount our input, right? Like you were saying, more or less. Can we go on the opposite extreme? I mean, is there times where we overinflate our input into something? That's my question.
Meaning what?
Well, I mean, I get what you're saying. You're really bringing alive the necessity to value your efforts and make them effective. I get that. But on the other side of the spectrum, I mean, if we overvalue our input, if I don't do it, it won't get done, sometimes becomes disastrous behavior where one person, the old adage, 90% of the work's done by 10% of the people. There are those that think if they don't do it, it doesn't get done. And a lot of times they're discounting a lot of people in the way, and they don't realize they can leave a wake of disaster. I'm just saying, can we cross the line?
Or in marriage? You're talking to marriage also, or just in general?
Just in general. But the question that's coming from Esther Herrett, who is another Canadian, she's on the east coast of Canada. She's asking a question. What if a Jew marries a non-Jew and the non-Jew converts after they were married? Does this make it one soul, was her question.
So seemingly it should, right? Even though really maybe, if they're a non-Jew, it's not the right person to marry, right? But if they are, if they do convert, they have a Jewish soul, time. Right? And that Jewish soul originally was at Mount Sinai, because there's no non-Jew wants to convert that their soul wasn't at Mount Sinai, because it makes no logical sense at all. Right. The fact that I grew up with, a lot of things within Judaism, okay, sitting in the sukkah, shaking, lulav and all that. Fine. You take a non-Jew living in the prairies. He comes to a synagogue on sukkahs, for goodness sakes, here, right. Here's my, here's my lulav here, and you can walk in the synagogue and you see people with their palm fronds going, oh no, like they're shaking. They got the lemon on steroids. They're like, what is going on over here? Right? So what can happen? What can happen is that a soul, a Jewish soul that was at Mount Sinai, through intermarriage and assimilation, that soul essentially can be a non-Jewish soul. How can that happen? All you need is intermarriage. And, let's say, let's say that Jewish soul was, was a guy, and he marries a non-Jewish woman. So what happens? All those non-Jewish children, right? All those children are not Jewish, right? So let's say even though that soul was originally Jewish, so it can get messed up through intermarriage, through assimilation. So if that is true, does that mean it can't reconnect and become a Jewish soul? Can certainly happen. Now, Kabbalistically, which we're not going to get into, right? But Kabbalistically, it's a whole complicated thing. It's a whole complicated thing because you can't just say, well, a soul just becomes Jewish, becomes non-Jewish, or it's a male soul becomes a female soul, right? There's a lot more going on. We're not going into detail here, but there's a lot more complicated, right? But essentially, if that person converts, right, and once they convert, that Jewish soul goes in. So who's to say it's not, that's not the other half of the soul? It's just that soul got messed up in the process, right? That's how we can get messed up through intermarriage and assimilation, and can come back, become Jewish, and they can be two halves, right? They can be one half, another half, and that's how it would work out, right? That's how I would answer. Hope that answers the question. Your other question, which I thought you were really asking about marriage, but it can be applied in general, which is that, you could have a lot of lazy people in the world, and you could have only 10% that are people that really do things, right? I was just reading, an article over Shabbos about Jewish political liaisons, right? Meaning they are, you can ask what I was reading, it's a good question. We won't go there, but it was about Orthodox liaisons to, let's say, non-Jewish, governors, politicians, etc. And, and this whole thing about, how they get the Jewish vote and what, how they have to educate them, what it means to be a Jew, and all that. So you got these people, you got a few of these, people, people know who they are, because I'm sure they're not, there are hundreds of people here, right? But they're a liaison, right? Essentially a liaison. So what are they doing? They're making a match between their candidate, whoever they represent, the Jewish community, right? And everyone knows that, in certain communities, whoever the Rebbe says to vote for, that's who you vote for, right? So, you could have 20,000 votes in one shot, 10,000 votes in one shot. That's like money in the bank, right? So to speak. So obviously, these Orthodox liaisons have to give over the information, right, to their political people, whatever. So why am I even mentioning that? So I'm mentioning that because how many liaisons are there, right? In America, in general, how many Orthodox liaisons are there? I'm not going to say there are 5, there are probably more, right? They're probably, maybe there are 20, maybe there are 50, whatever it is.
And
but they're the ones
thousands.
putting the candidates together in order to get the Jewish vote. So someone will say, okay, so they're doing the dirty work for a lot of other people, right? They're getting their, I'm not going to say they're getting their hands dirty, but they probably are, right, in different ways. But they're working hard to get the Jewish people to vote for X, Y, and Z, right? So there I can see, you have leaders, right? You have people that are out there, in leadership, which is good. But the leaders, how many people can be leaders? Right? In general, you only have a handful of leaders. Everyone else, I'm not going to say is follow the leader.
But, can they overvalue their efforts? Is really more my question, because you talked about undervaluing, never undervaluing.
In other words, if they're putting all this effort in and they say, well, I mean, if this is what you mean, tell me, and that is, look at what I'm doing. I'm doing 80%, 90% of the work. I want all the accolades. Right? Now, I found out the hard way when I was looking for a job in Jewish outreach that there were there were places that refused to hire me, A, because I was older, B, because I had a bigger family, and C, because, I had a lot of knowledge, a lot of background, done a lot of things in my life, and they didn't want to hire me because they didn't want to be outshone. Right? They'd rather hire somebody little wet behind the ears, someone they don't have to pay so well, and someone's not going to overshadow them. So my question to a few people was, I'm looking to help wherever I can, and also to make a living. right? I'm not looking to outshine anyone. I'm not looking to, whatever. I'm looking to help as much as I can. And what was the answer? The answer was we're not interested. Why aren't they interested? Because, of the number of things that, that we mentioned. So I would think 2 heads are better than 1, right? 3 heads are better than 1. Why? You can accomplish a lot more. You have your own biases, right? You think, oh, it should go like this. It should go like that, right? That's why you need a soundboard. That's why you need to give over to someone else in order for that person to say, well, maybe it's a good idea. Maybe it's not a good idea. What are the pros? What are the cons? But what happens over here, you bring up a very good point, and that is that what happens is people get a fat head. Ego gets involved. Because the person says, I'm the one who did this, right? Simple complex. Me, myself, and I, right? I did this. I built this. That's why some people, when they start an organization, they don't have any partners, right? And I would say in certain ways it makes more sense. Why? Because if you ever disagree, or you ever, you could put your 2 heads together, right? It doesn't mean you're going to have a good partnership, right? Why? Because egos get in the way. Someone says it's my way or the highway. Why don't you ever listen to me? I should get equal salary. Like, this is what can happen. Now, there are places, I know of some places where you had 2 heads there for 50 years, more than 50 years, right? It doesn't always work out that way. So, many things can get in the way, and a person has a different vision, a different idea, and you're not going in that way. So so they have a choice. How important is their vision? If their vision is much more important, that's what drives them. They're going to step down eventually because they want to see their dream. They want to see their dream met. Right, but I would think in theory, and I only say it's in theory because I don't think it happens all that often, and that is that people have to be on the exact same page, right? And if you're doing different aspects, of the same thing, and you're helping to grow an organization, why is it about me and about me and about me? It's like being on a baseball field, right? The right fielder. The right fielder, he gets a bug up his nose, and he says, you know what? I can be a pitcher. I can throw it 97, 98 miles an hour, curveball, slider, but he's got a gun arm, right? He's got an unbelievable arm. He belongs in the outfield. That's what he belongs. But he says, I want to be the pitcher. I want to be the first baseman. I want to be the catcher. But what happens? So you got 11 guys on the field. If you got 11 guys on the field, each one, unless they can do other things, you have utility players. You got this guy from the Los Angeles Angels can pitch and DH. Pretty amazing, you think about it. But okay, most people play one position. Some play maybe a few different positions. But if you're not on the, if you're not all on the same path, you have to be diverse because if you're not diverse, you're never going to win. Right? You can't have someone who's a left fielder play catcher unless he can play catcher and he's good. Right? So too, in any organization, you have different players. Now, someone will say, my job's more important. I'm raising the money. Someone says, what do you mean? I'm the teacher. I'm bringing the people in because of my name. Right? So you got, well, who's more important? They're both important. Right? You need both. Or we could just be like me, one-man wrecking crew. Nobody else. Right, but in the end, what happens is ego gets in the way, right? And if a person's not patted on the back and they're not thanked for what they do, so what happens? They feel bad. They don't feel like they're accomplishing, or maybe they're accomplishing so much that in the end, what's going to be, they're not going to get what they deserve, right? I just also read an article about teachers who are grossly underpaid in the Jewish community. No question. Out, yeah. And one of the things teachers, besides trying to control the classroom and everything else, besides they're being underpaid, is recognition. All they want, they want to be paid well, that's true. But in the end, they want to hear from the parents. They want to be thanked. They want to get notes every so often to say that what they're doing is a great job. But if they don't get that, not to mention they're getting underpaid, not to mention they may have to do, side work, etc. It's not a field most people want to go into, right? You're already in a losing situation, right? You're not making that much money, but even if you have a tremendous passion, you give your life for it, but you're not getting anything, you're not getting anything back. So a person will say, what, you're looking to be patted on the back? That's what you want, right? I'm just thinking this out loud. After reading this article, think about it. We mentioned before in Pirkei Avos, why does, what's the highest level of serving God? So you never know how all this comes together. Torah is always intertwined. What's the best way to serve God? What do we say in the first chapter? The best way is to serve God without getting reward. That's the highest level. If a person serves God to get reward, they'll get reward, but it's a low level. It's a much lower level. Now, some of the commentaries say, okay, why is God going to, in duties of the heart, ask the question, right? Later we're going to see, probably in the next millennium, we're going to see that a person's going to think they're God's gift to the world because they learned a lot of Torah. What does the mission Pirkei Avos say? That's what you're born to do, right? We're going to rehash this a number of times. That's what you're born to do. Comes along the Chovos Levavos and duties of the heart, and he says, why are you getting reward? That's what you're born and bred to do as a Jew. You got to keep the Torah. You got to keep the mitzvahs. Say, am I getting a Twinkie? Anyone eat Twinkies today? Am I getting a Twinkie? Smarties, whatever, a big wheel. That's what I should be getting. That's why I'm keeping Torah and mitzvahs, because I want a Twinkie. So it comes along the Chovos Levavos, and he says, you know why God gives you reward? You want to know what the reason is God gives you the reward? Survey says, because God has chesed. It's an act of loving kindness. Because you are obligated 100% to do what God wants. Forget about the Twinkie. Forget about Tootsie Rolls. Forget about Ben & Jerry's. Oh, Ben & Jerry's is out. Right? No more Ben & Jerry's. Forget about Ben & Jerry's. Right? So if that's the case, you're going to say, what? Don't I get Ben & Jerry's? Can't I put that on my Twinkie? God says, I'm giving you reward because it's a chesed. You're obligated. You're subservient to me, God says. Right? Many times in the Torah. You got to do what he says. That's it. You want reward? Don't be a pig. Right? You're a pig over here. You deserve reward. What do you deserve reward for? That's what you're commanded to do. If that's what you're commanded to do, that's it. Right? So you got to say, but I want a reward anyway. Okay, so that's incentive. If someone, non-Jew, once told me many years ago, yeah, that's the reason you're going to do Torah mitzvahs for a portion of the world to come. And what would happen? And someone once told me, I've heard a number of times, when I die, I'm going 6 feet under. Which I said, I hope for your sake you're right, because if I'm right, you're toast. Right? But let's say there is a world to come. And even the person said to me, okay, so let's say I'm right and you're wrong. Well, I said, okay, I disagree, but let's say. He said, so why would you keep Torah mitzvahs anyway? So my answer was, even if I would find out I would never get reward anyway, why would I keep it? The answer, I would keep it because it makes the absolute most sense of giving meaning to life, even if you get nothing back. Yeah. Now, some other people would say, if I would find out it's not true and I'm not getting anything, I'm gonna have the time of my life. Yeah, but you know what? You're not gonna be happy. You're not gonna find meaning in it, right? You're just not going to, because we all know that most people are on Prozac today, and the more money you have, probably the more Prozac you're on, right? People are miserable. Even though, according to the Constitution, forget about Canada, according to the American Constitution, you have the right to life, liberty, and property. Pursuit of happiness. Yeah. Right? But the Founding Fathers don't tell you how. I learned American history. That was one of my fortes. Right? Even though I got a degree from history in Columbia University. Ooh, impressive. Right? But what does that mean? The Founding Fathers of America, let's remember, they were Bible thumpers, right? They were Bible thumpers. So if they were Bible thumpers and they say, you have the right to life in the pursuit of happiness, how am I going to find happiness? Right? So the Rabbi Chaim in the Path of the Just says some people are going to be aesthetics. What are they going to do? They're going to show how righteous and pious I am. I'm going to, in the frozen tundra in the Yukon territory, what are they going to do in the middle of the winter? They're going to run outside with their tank top and shorts, and they're going to run around in the snow. They're going to afflict themselves, and what are they going to say? Look how pious I am. So comes along the Ramchal. You can look it up in Path of the Just. The Ramchal says like this, I beg to differ. You're not an aesthetic. My language, you're an idiot. Right? You're running around in the snow, showing how pious you are. No. God says, I want you to take the physical and sanctify it. I want you to be the best person you can be by sanctifying what I say. I didn't tell you to afflict the body except once. When you were supposed to afflict the body, what does the Torah tell me? Yom Kippur. It says you have to afflict yourself. The only problem is, the Torah doesn't tell me how. Right? Come on, where are you, Karaites? How do I afflict the body? Maybe I take lashes. Maybe I hang myself upside down so the brain goes to my, the blood goes to my brain. I pass out. Maybe that's how I afflict it. Oh, come along. The rabbis, four-letter word. Rabbis, what do the rabbis tell us? Can't eat, can't drink. Right? Afflicting yourself means fasting. Right? So good. When the Torah tells me to fast, I have an obligation to fast. Minor fast, major fast. Last week was a major fast. Right? It's about the destruction of the temple, first temple, second temple, and all, pretty much every tragedy that ever happened to Jewish people. That's the day for tragedy, right? Which is the ninth of the fast of Av. The other, that's sundown to sundown. So that's a 25-hour fast, just like Yom Kippur. All the other fasts are sun up to sundown. They're minor fasts, but those are obligations, right? Unless a woman is nursing, a person, there are different ways. Different ways that a person may not have to fast. That's not really the point here. But the idea is we afflict ourselves when God says to. We don't, I'm going to be in an ashram, God forbid, and we're not going to talk for months. We're not going to eat that much. And afflicting the body is not what God wants. What God wants is, He wants you to keep what He says to the highest level. So if you're a Christian, everything's bad. Everything's evil. Anyone's ever been to a Purim party, everybody knows Purim's a crazy time. People drink more, they eat. It's a whole celebration, right? But very deep, if we think about it, the day of Yom Kippur, Yom Kippurim, a day like Purim. Yom Kippur's the opposite. Yom Kippur's the day I feel like a piece of dirt. I beat my chest 100 times saying I said this, I said that, I made fun of the CFL, like all these things. Right, that you have to repent. I don't think I have to repent for that. But anyway, things that you have to repent for. Right? You feel like an absolute piece of dirt. You're fasting for 25 hours. Purim is the opposite. Purim is the absolute opposite, but you can gain spiritually so much from Purim just like by Yom Kippur. So what's one possible answer? One possible answer is the fact that a person has the ability to sanctify the physical. In other words, if a person drinks, what do we say? Nichnas yayin yoitze soid. When the wine goes in, the secrets come out, right? Meaning that if a person drinks, what's going to come out? They're going to talk about baseball scores of the CFL, or are they going to speak about Torah and about the destruction of the temple, wanting to be close to God, and just spewing out words of Torah? If you're going to say stupid things, you don't deserve to drink, right? And if you're not going to be able to do other things, you can't drink. Right? But if what's going to come out of you is going to be all this spirituality and all this wanting to be close to God and all that, that's the point. That has even more power than Yom Kippur. Why does it have more power than Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur's easy. I feel like a piece of dirt. Just read the liturgy. Right? You're banging your chest. I sin doing this. I sin doing that. I sin doing the other thing. Right? All these things 5 times. You do it on Yom Kippur. You're fasting. You're not eating. You're not drinking, right? Your head's about to pop, right? You feel awful, but this is what you have to do, right? That's how you gain atonement for certain things that you've done. Very good. Yeah, Purim, come on. That's the opposite extreme. Total opposite extreme. And what would the Christians say? Yeah, Yom Kippur makes more sense. Makes a lot more sense because they say everything's bad. And if everything's bad, there's no way to sanctify the physical. Come along, the Jewish people, and say, first of all, we came first. Second of all, we do that all the time. We do that by Shabbos. Comes Friday night. What do we sanctify the day for after we prayed? Wine, grape juice, bread, good food, right? But what are you speaking about at the Shabbos table, right? Are you talking about, you're talking about politics? You're talking about Ben and Jerry's? I mean, even if you have a good point there, right? Are you talking about other things, or are you talking Torah? right? So, okay, it could be a little bit lighter, a little bit heavier. You're singing songs, that's sanctifying the physical. But essentially, you're going to say, come on, you're filling up your stomach. True. You're eating good food. True. Right? But what's the point? God's giving you an opportunity to tune into his world. Right? He's giving you an opportunity for 25 hours, to stop, computers, to stop, creating, destroying, etc. when things are forbidden. He's giving you a golden opportunity once a week to tune into his world. Right? Because really, Shabbos is 1/60th of the world to come. Right? It's similar to what's going to be in the world to come. You're basking in God's glory. You have to know how, right? You have to know when to turn off your profane mind and stop thinking about the everyday and all these things. Not easy, not easy. All of a sudden, you light the Shabbos candles. Okay, that's it. Holy, holy, holy. Wait a minute. 2 minutes before, I was busy doing this, doing that, thinking about the other thing. That's it. It's not easy to turn off your brain. Certainly not easy. Right? But if you're tuning into God's world, he gives you the ability to sanctify the physical. By the Christians and others, it's all about aestheticism. Right? It's all about, now I'm not gonna speak for 24 hours. I'm not gonna do this. I'm gonna afflict the body. I'm gonna afflict other things. That's not what he wants. That's not how you get to greatness.
Wiggly
That's
worm
not how you get to spirituality. Yeah. Spirituality comes by sanctifying the physical, which is not an easy thing. Certainly not an easy thing by any stretch. Question.
I just, I've been bombarded in social media lately with a couple of messianics, just trying to pound hard like they don't seem to get a personal choice or there's no one here to save. I've been pounding back at him about the concept of the bread of shame. Can you tie that all in? Does that have any relevance?
What, the bread of shame?
Well, I'm trying to be clear and in line with what you're sharing. That they don't have that in their concept. They don't realize that some way, shape, or form they're not going to feel like they belong. I mean, without effort, without any.
I don't know. Why do they have any effort? All they have to do is believe in JC. They don't have to do anything.
Well, of course, in their yeah, but I told them, quit pushing it, right? Quit pushing. All they're trying to do is sell the bread of shame, and I'm not buying, right? Robert,
question?
I'm sorry. What was the question?
What's the question?
Could you elaborate on what that is?
What, the bread of shame?
Yes.
What do they want? The fact that they're going to say, their idea is be like us or you're going to fry.
Right. 100%.
They're going to say, well, if you're going to live in this world, right, as long as, we believe in him or, anything else, I don't have to do anything. But we are responsible. In their world, there's no responsibility.
Exactly.
Right? In my language, anybody else's language, that would be called pass the buck. We're not into pass the buck. We're into you have to take responsibility for your actions. And that's something nobody wants to hear. But the Christians will bring you 25, 30 proofs that make no sense to say that someone came to this world and he did it for you. So you don't have to do anything. Now the question would be, why would I do anything? Anything at all in a spiritual way if someone came and took care of that for me? Why would I do that? Why would I do anything? They'll say, no, he came, you're eating his blood, you're eating his flesh, you're this, whatever it is, right? It's a whole convoluted mess, right? But the Torah is very clear. As the Rambam says in the 13 principles, there's responsibility.
Exactly.
The Torah makes clear you say the Shema twice a day, right? A person has an obligation to say it twice a day, once in the morning, once at night, and even before you go to sleep. The second paragraph is all about what Second paragraph's about if I do the right thing, you'll have water, you'll have food, everything's great. You do the wrong thing, famine, war. What is the Torah telling me? There's a right way to do things. There's a wrong way to do things. But more importantly, as we mentioned before, there are repercussions. There are 100% repercussions for your actions. Now, in that other world, I say a couple, Hail Marys, I'm good. I confess I'm good. What does that do? What does that do? And let's say, we'll make it graphic. Let's say someone embarrassed someone in public. Right? They embarrassed someone in public, destroyed them. Just absolutely destroyed them. Come to the priest, he says, okay, he confesses, or she confesses, says a couple Hail Marys, he's good. What about the person he destroyed? Forget about what he did between him and God. Him and God's a different issue. Let them fight it out. It's between man and man. Right? This is what Tisha B'Av's about. It's about our obligation to our fellow man. Right? The temple is destroyed because of unlawful hatred. Also for idolatry, immorality, other things. But the second temple is destroyed because of unlawful hatred. What do you mean unlawful hatred? So, King Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, there's a time to love and a time to hate. But you're not allowed to hate your fellow Jew in his heart. That's what the Torah tells me. Technically, I can hate your guts. I can hate any non-Jew's guts. Probably not a good thing to do. But technically speaking, maybe it's not forbidden. Because the Torah tells me I'm obligated to love all Jews. Right? I'm not allowed to hate them, but obviously I can hate what they do. Right? And maybe, if they're so evil, I can certainly hate them. Right? We're not going to get into that now. The point is I hate what they do. Right? But does that mean they're not liable? Of course they're going to be liable. Right? They're going to be liable. Now, what they do between God and man and God, that's a different issue. But if someone damaged someone else, right? They damaged someone else. Now, in a court of regular law, secular court, within secular court, the person sues you for damages, you're liable. You're 100% liable. Smashed their car, you stole something, whatever it is. You are 100% liable if you're liable. Now, comes along the Christians. And says, what do you mean? Why should there be a law of the land? Maybe we'll knock out the law of the land. You say a few Hail Marys. Who cares? You're done. You don't have to do anything. I don't understand. You just damaged the person. Right? You smashed his car, stole his money, whatever it is. You damaged them. So how can you not be liable? So, this is the way of saying, I don't have to take responsibility.
Right.
Now we see, I'm not going to go into their mindset and what they do, with the beginning of creation. Because the beginning of creation, Adam and Eve, eat from the tree. I do understand they'll say there was Mr. S, he caused evil, this is why it happened. Okay, it's probably a bad example, right? But at the end of the day, Adam and Eve eat from the tree, right? We don't care if the snake comes or whatever. It doesn't matter. They eat from the tree. They eat from the tree, they change history, right? So now, if you want to tell me evil happens, and evil happens because of Mr. S, okay, so now there are repercussions. See, there are repercussions for the world because comes on the snake, tries to entice Eve. He entices Eve, Eve eats, she gives to Adam to eat. They get thrown out of the garden, right? The snake also gets punished, right? But I would say like this, she got enticed. Let's say she was under onus. She did it with free will. That is true, but if it wouldn't be for the snake, she wouldn't have eaten from it. If she wouldn't eat from it, so I would ask a very simple question. Right now, let's turn it philosophically into a pretzel. Why is she punished? Why is Adam punished? It's the snake's fault. It's Mr. S's fault. Punish him. No, you know why they have to be punished? Even according to Christians, because they did something wrong. They absolutely did something wrong they shouldn't have done. Doesn't matter who they were enticed by. Right? But at the end of the day, we could pass the buck and say, come on. I mean, that's what Eve does, right? Adam said it was Eve's fault. Eve said it was the snake's fault. And then God nails the snake. But he punishes everybody. He says, all right, everyone out of the pool. Punishes the snake, punishes Eve,
out of the pool.
punishes
Okay,
Adam.
thanks.
Right? He throws them all out.
Right.
Right? Now, in their world's view, why should Adam and Eve be thrown out? In other words, it's the snake's fault. Really, it's a snake's fault. But at the end of the day, they're going to have to agree. Even if the snake did it, there are repercussions. There's some level of repercussions, right? And the repercussions, according to what the Torah says, repercussions are they brought death to the world. Adam and Eve brought death to the world. Who instigated it? The snake. The snake instigated. He's a fallen angel, according to them, right? Mr. S is a fallen angel, so it's all his fault. So I would say, if I were Adam and Eve, I would answer very simple. What do you want from us? He made us do it. He convinced us. Why should we get punished? So they would have to agree, even if Mr. S does, that there are still repercussions. But even without that, according to their worldview, why in the world would they be responsible for anything they do? They murder, they're a mafioso. What happens? They say a few Hail Marys, they're good. What about the person they murdered? How do they get absolute, how are they absolved of what they've done? They're only absolved because you believe in JC, and that's good enough. That's not taking responsibility. That is a major difference between Judaism, certainly in Christianity. We're not even going to bring Islam into the picture here, right? But that's the difference. There are repercussions. There are absolute repercussions. So a person can't say, I'm not liable. I didn't do anything, etc. So believing in him is a cop-out, right? It's a major, major cop-out over here, because that means what I do is irrelevant. That's what it means. Right. I leave my brains out the window over here, and I don't have to think. I can do whatever I want. I could steal. I could cheat. I could commit adultery. There will be other repercussions. But according to them, what are the repercussions? Confession, fine. And then, nothing. Seemingly, I don't have to do anything else. Right? I say a few Hail Marys, I'm good. Right? But that means no one would ever, ever take responsibility for what they do. They wouldn't. They'll live their lives, as animalistic as they want. Hopefully they won't get caught doing other things. If they do, big deal. Because in the spiritual realm, there aren't repercussions. Right? Which why would that be appealing? I mean, let's say better. I understand why it would be appealing. Right? Because then I'm not responsible for anything I do. Right? But that's not going to allow me to have a relationship with God in the sense that I have to take responsibility. In this case, there's no responsibility at all. No, I passed the buck. Right? So if I pass the buck, very good. Why would I ever get punished later? Now, the only reason a person may get punished later is because of the law of the land. Because the law says if you do this or you do that, you're liable. Right? If you get caught. And you have to pay this. You have, whatever the damages are. Right? Whatever the judge says, this is what you got to do. And that's it. They say, well, we don't hold to the law of the land. Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't say there are no responsibilities, and then the law of the land, they have no jurisdiction. Of course, they have jurisdiction, right? Even within Torah, certain things go against Torah, but it's the law of the land, right? So let's say, in Europe, there are places where you can't do ritual slaughter because they claim it's cruel, right? They claim it's inhumane. Now, I saw in one place how non-Jews were killing cows. I'm not going to get gross here. Right? It was, you want to say what we do is inhumane? This was nasty. Absolutely nasty. The way that, the ritual slaughter within Judaism kills the cow, 1 second he's dead. Right? The knife is razor sharp, right? It's the trachea, the windpipe, gone. Animal dies. These non-Jews are like hacking at this animal. I mean, it was awful. The animal's still alive being hacked to death. Right? So there are countries that say, you can't do it, it's inhumane. So in Switzerland, of all places, being neutral like Switzerland, so many years ago, it was on the books that if there was supposed to be ritual slaughter, one of the things they had to do before they ritual slaughter, they would allow it as long as you stun the animal first. Now, if you stun the animal, obviously that's humane when you fry them, right? Obviously you don't kill them, but you just, you weaken them by giving them a little bit of juice. And then you slaughter them, that you can do. Comes along, Rabbi Chaim Weinberg, of blessed memory, wrote many, many pages on this topic. And in the end, he said you can't do it. right? First of all, you're hurting the animal, right? You're giving pain to the animal, right? That's forbidden. But second of all, we don't know exactly what electricity does over here. Even though they give them juice and the animal doesn't die, but they did show that some of the internal organs got fried by the amount of juice that they gave, even a minimal amount. There are certain organs that totally got fried, which made them into being what we call a treifa. There are 18 signs of an animal. The rabbis tell us that an animal will not live within 1 year. So that means you're not allowed to eat it, right? You have to check the lungs, you have to check the stomach, whatever, like these different things they have to check. Make sure no perforations, other things, hole in the brain, whatever it is. So comes along Rabbi Chaim Weinberg, and Rabbi Chaim Weinberg said, hey, you give a certain amount of juice to an animal, we don't know what it does. Because even the minimal amount, even if the animal does not die, it could cause the animal to be not kosher, and you can't slaughter it. You won't be able to slaughter it. So he said it's forbidden to do, right? You're not allowed to do it. So what happens? So now the law of the land says, we'll allow you to do it this way. Jewish law says we can't allow it. So what happens? Can't do it, right? You can't do it. Now, in the former Soviet Union, just on this topic, people were willing to sacrifice their lives to circumcise their kids. Because the law of the land was not allowed to do it, but what do you do if you have a boy? You have to circumcise him. You have an obligation on the 8th day to circumcise him, even at the risk of death. He still has to be circumcised, right? So it doesn't matter what the law of the land says, right? On the other hand, there are certain things, okay, right? If it doesn't go against Judaism, fine. If it does, then you got to find a way around it somehow, right? And certainly in Europe, there are all kinds of terrible decrees. The Jews, lived, in feudal times. They had their own piece of land that was run by the feudal lord, whoever it was, what they call, I guess in Yiddish, call him a paritz. A paritz is the one who owned like all these lands, whatever, and he could charge whatever he wanted, right? He could charge them, a certain amount of the crop, certain amount of money, etc. And what happens, it makes the rent so high they can't afford it. So they do whatever they can to pay. And what could happen? They could have to flee, right? But they're living in a place that is totally, it's immoral, and they can't live there. So you might, you can't live according to the law of the land, right? There are many places Jews have had to leave for different reasons, but you can't compromise Torah mitzvahs, right? That you can't do. And when the Jews came to America and they threw their tefillin overboard, or some of them that stayed even religious, right? What happened? They had a problem, because if they couldn't work on the Sabbath, they'd have a job. So many Jews left the fold because they couldn't make it. They had to work on Shabbos, or they felt they had to work on Shabbos. There are other Jews that were very strong. They were very strong, and what happened? They didn't give in. They didn't work on Shabbos, but all their kids heard was, it's so difficult to be a Jew. So the kids said, if it's so difficult to be a Jew, why would I want to be a Jew? Let me give up my Judaism. I'll have a little bit of trimmings, but why would I want to be a Jew? It's too hard. It's way too hard. So what happened? Many Jews went by the wayside. So, in our lives today, it's a million times easier. People see Jews, Orthodox Jews everywhere, right? They're all over, right? Many different cities, many places, so people know who we are. So you can't say, wow, I can't do this, can't do that, etc. Person has to have a job where they don't work, they're not going to work on Shabbos. And if a person will get fired because of that, you could sue them, right? It's discrimination, right? There's no question, certainly no question about that. I'm not going to say it's easy 100%, but this is what you have to do. This is part of the, it's part of the sacrifice of being a Jew. So even if that is, even if that's the case, you got to do what you need to do. You can't you can't say, well, it's supposed to make me work on the Sabbath, so find another job. I had somebody that wanted to convert. I don't think they ended up converting in the end, but they said, Rabbi, I made an appointment, a meeting that I can't get out of, and I made this meeting on the first day of Sukkot, on the first day of Sukkot. You're not allowed to work on the first 2 days outside of Israel on Sukkot. Intermediate day is a different issue, but you're not allowed to work the first days of the last day. He says, Rabbi, what am I supposed to do? So I said, go buy yourself a Jewish calendar. That's what you got to do. I don't care where you get it. Find a Jewish calendar. Because if you don't have a Jewish calendar, how are you going to know when the holidays are? You know they're sometime in September, October normally. This year it's very early. Right? We're going to be in a leap year. So it's very early this year. Yeah, but you have to know. That's part of the criteria. Don't come crying to me because you were stupid enough not to buy a calendar. Right? You got to buy a calendar. So I can't believe I did it. Buy a calendar. That is what you have to do. Any of these holidays, Sukkot, Passover, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Shavuos. This is what you have to do. You have to know when they fall out, and you have to take them as sick days. Right? You have to take them as sick days. You can't work on them. Intermediate days of Passover and Sukkot, that's a different issue. Person has to work, they can, etc. But in the end of the day, there are days you can't, right? Days that are forbidden. So therefore, you're not allowed to. So you got to figure out how you're going to do it. And you have to, you tell the boss, weeks before, I have to take these days off, etc. Whatever it is. Right? That's your obligation. That's your obligation. If you don't do that, you're irresponsible. Totally irresponsible. I don't want to hear excuses. I didn't know. How did you not know? There are hundreds, of Jewish calendars that exist in the world. This is something
easy to find. Yeah,
that you have to put
Google.
the front of your mind, the back of your mind. That's what you have to do. Right? So in this case, I have to be prepared. Ignorance isn't bliss. But at the same time, what do we have to give over to our families? We have to give over that there's nothing more important than Torah. We have to be willing, even if God forbid, we may have to die for the sake of Torah. Not that we're interested in dying for the sake of Torah, but we certainly will instead of kiss the cross, right? That's our obligation.
Yeah.
That's our obligation. And if you don't, you transgress the Torah prohibition of not sanctifying God's name. That doesn't apply to a non-Jew. Obviously, it applies to a Jew. So that being the case, that's what I have to do. So you're in it for better or for worse, but for goodness sakes, you have to understand what you're doing. You have to make it part of your life. You have to live it. And if you don't, then 5 minutes before the Sabbath comes in, you're busy ripping toilet paper. You say, "Why am I doing this? Why in the world I'm doing this? I don't." Person. More important, I think, my opinion, for what it's worth. More important than knowing what to do is understanding why you're doing it. Because once I understand why I'm doing it, it answers up a lot of things. But I have to keep it in my mind. Because when I'm busy and I'm running and I'm this and I'm that, and I'm chasing my tail and all these different things, I have to remember what the purpose is. See, by Passover, we're busy cleaning, scrubbing, all these different things. Guess what? We forget, we think that we are the Paschal offering, or our kids are the Paschal offering, or whatever, but it's going to get done. Doesn't matter how it gets done. By the 15th of Nisan, everything has to be cleaned. You have to have 3 matzahs. You have to have 4 cups of wine. You're going to have charoset. You're going to have bitter herbs, right? All these different things, but it has to be done. So you got to plan. Life is about planning, right? If you don't think about what you're doing, just like someone's going to say, well, I'm going to work on going on a diet. Well, that's great. What are you doing to work on that? Nothing, just a thought. Just a thought, whatever. I was just thinking, I should go on a diet. Very good. Are you making a plan to do it? Right? Are you making some sort of plan to work on things you need to work on? Or you just think about it for a few seconds and say, I really have to work on this, and you just blow it off. Right? So that's what life is. Life is a struggle. It's a day-to-day struggle. Everybody knows. Some have it easier. Some have it more difficult. Sure. In the end, it doesn't matter because that's what I'm doing in this world. Am I going to do the right thing? Am I going to be close to God? Right? If I do the right thing, or am I going to be further away? Right? I have to take an accounting. We should all certainly take accounting before a person goes to sleep. Right? Rabbi Chaim Brisker said on himself, Chaim Brisker more than 150 years ago, said on himself that, before he went to sleep, he thought about how much he wanted to learn the next day, what he'd want to accomplish. And by the end of the day, he thought about what he did. Did I fulfill my obligations? Didn't I fulfill my obligations? But, we have to have a plan. These things do not come out of osmosis. They don't just, a person can't just think, okay, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do the other thing. Well, great. What are you doing to put that into action? Well, really nothing. It's just a thought. Just an idea. Just an idea I had. Well, very good. So, you have to put it in action. You have to work at it. And if you don't work at it, nothing's ever going to happen. You're not going to be handed anything on a platter. As the Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, in the way of God, Ramchal says, clear, you're put in this world to strive. And however much you succeed, barring that you didn't do so many things that are so bad, you have some sort of portion of the world to come, right? But we have struggles, we pass, we don't pass, whatever it is, we're in this world to work. That's what we're doing here. But again, there are many things we don't do right. There are some things, hopefully we do right, but we have to realize we have to be better. We have an obligation to give back our soul when we die the way we got it. Now someone's going to say, come on, a soul, when God breathed in the spirit of life, we're a child, right? We're an absolute child, true. Child grows up, becomes a toddler, becomes a youngster, becomes a young adult, all these things. So time goes by relatively quick. So the thing is, you get into some bad habits earlier, they're very hard to fix because they become part of us. So we want to really go in the right direction. And even if we are going in the right direction, do not think Mr. S, evil inclination, whatever you want to call him, is going to sit down and die. He's not gonna just keel over here. He's gonna make your life an absolute misery, much more difficult than you ever had it. So you're gonna say, it's not fair. I'm going in the right direction. I'm trying to do the right thing. That's all true. Right? But even if you're doing the right thing and God's gonna help you, if you want to do the right thing, you want to do the wrong thing, God's not gonna stop you. But at the end of the day, we do understand there are gonna be struggles. There are gonna be struggles we pass, struggles we don't pass, but we have to remember we're in this world to work. And if that is the case, there's no free lunch. And because there's no free lunch, I have an absolute obligation to fight and to work as hard as I can. Now, what happens is, in general, is we get beaten down in life. That's what happens. And therefore, we forget about our goals. We just give in to our evil inclination and basically say, whatever's going to be is going to be. Hopefully, God's going to understand. But I'm under so much pressure. All these things are happening. God can't expect anything otherwise. And that is a major mistake. Because God expects the world of us. Because God breathed in the spirit of life, right? Oh, so how do we get on to all this? I almost forgot. It's because God gave us a soul. When God gave us a soul, what does God say? I'm putting this pure soul in the body, right? And whatever body it is, I'm putting this pure soul in. Now, by the end of a person's life, whenever that's going to be, are we going to be in any way, shape, or form, are we going to have the ability to say, right, with a straight face, I'm giving you the soul back exactly how you gave it to me? Now,
wow,
everyone's going to have
to way to put it.
Everyone's going to have to say no, because we're sullied with sin. Now, could be, that God's forgiven us, for terrible things we've done. We've gone through Yom Kippur, we've suffered, we've gone through other things, but is it going to be the same? Is it going to be the same as it was given? Did we use our strength in spiritual terms on a daily basis? Did we train our minds to think in Torah and mitzvahs? Every aspect, every second of the day. Did we work hard? No, did we work hard, on a regular basis, or do we just shrug our shoulders and say, what could I do? The CFL is starting. What could I do? Right? What's going to be? How are we going to answer? And that is part of what we say that hell is. I mentioned in my video on Tanakh Talk. And that is that's going to be the embarrassment that we get in the next world when a person gets judged. Because the person can't deny the fact we did something. Because everyone has had an out-of-body experience, Jew or non-Jew. They all say the same thing. What's the first thing? They see their life flash before their eyes. That's before they see the light and all that. They see their life flash before their eyes. What does that mean? They see every single action that they've done. Now, a person asked me this. They say, well, how do we know that? The Talmud says there are two angels. follow us everywhere, record everything we do. So when God gives testimony, or let's say better, when God is going to judge us, he's going to bring these angels and say, okay, what does this person do? Right? Just like in this world, right? You're going to call witnesses, and the witness is going to say, okay, what did this person do? And they'll give testimony. So too in the heavenly court's no different. Does God need to do that? No. Certainly doesn't need to do that. He knows all the information, but he wants to be fair. Right? He wants to show the person what they've done. And then God's going to judge it. However, he's going to judge it now. So a person asks, how do we know we have two angels? So if we would have said this before Sony came into existence, and there was such a thing as, records, tapes, which don't exist now. I'm still working on, and getting rid of all my tapes, making them into MP3s, right? But, Sony does, if Sony didn't exist and all that, it's a good question. Then we don't have anything to visualize. We don't have anything to visualize at all, because we're going to say, come on, even though that's what the Talmud says, very good, but I don't really have any proof. How do I know something's going to get recorded? Oh, comes along Sony and Fuji and all the other companies, and they invent things that you can record on. Right? So now, is that really that far-fetched? That something can be recorded? It's not that far-fetched. Right? So way back when Jews really had much more faith in God than we do today, they believed it verbatim. Right? So our generation is going to say, come on, show me that's true. So we have proof. What do we have proof for? Even if you're going to say, well, angel, I don't really believe in angels, this and that. How could something be recorded and then be used? Oh, you want to know how it can be recorded? Because we're on Roku right now. We're on YouTube right now. So it's being recorded, right? See how much I can scream on both, right? We're being recorded. So it's not such a far jump to say that if we're being recorded right now, and see, I don't have a reputation, so I can say what I want, right? We're being recorded right now. So imagine that everything we do in general is being recorded. You can say, that's not a proof. Well, you got anything better that is going to show that there's an idea being recorded? Even without this, we have to have the faith and belief this is what's going to be. But now I can visualize it. I can totally visualize it could happen, because that's what we're doing right now. So someone say, oh, it's not good enough proof. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Point is that if a person sees his life flash before their eyes, they understand what absolute truth is. What's going to happen? You cannot deny you had your hand in the cookie jar. Now, I could put on my George Burns glasses, my funny mustache, and I'd say, okay, I'm playing God over here. I'm going to play God over and say, your hand was in the cookie jar. And what are we going to say? You're right. My hand was in the cookie jar. I got 10 excuses why. And God's going to say, okay, let's hear. Let me hear the excuses. Knocks out the first one. Second one. Maybe you'll hold by one of the excuses. Probably not. Right? Because God knows the thoughts of all men. He knows what we're thinking, what we're doing. And he knocks them all off. But the bottom line is, as we're running out of time here, the bottom line is I can't deny what I've done. And that, the commentaries say, is part of the embarrassment. It's part of the fixing up process that a person is going to have in order to fix up their soul. It's not just God's going to zap you and you're going to fry, going to fix you up that way. Embarrassment works wonders. So someone will say, so isn't it better? I'm living in this world. Let someone embarrass me. Let someone say things against me. Isn't that going to atone for things I've done? Yes, in a major way. Like my Rebbe would say, I got so many people spoken badly against me, etc. Going to get all their mitzvahs. Got nothing to worry about in the next world. I mean, he didn't say it like that, right? But he said, look, it's to my benefit. Like here, people say things, sticks and stones, right? But we get offended, we get annoyed, okay. But at the end of the day, things get said. Things can't be denied, that they were said. But shouldn't we be saying what a great thing it is? We should have more suffering in this world, so we go to the next world squeaky clean, right? But nobody wants to live like that. No one wants to be a masochist. But if we were in that next world, I have a whole bunch of stories we're not going to get to now, right? Maybe ask me about them next week. But the idea is that if we were in that world, and and it's really between spiritual life and death, and we realize that if we would have suffered more in this world, it would have taken care of a lot of transgressions. Then we would have asked for more, but nobody wants them, right? That's really the bottom line: is nobody wants them, right? But it would have helped us tremendously. So we'll have to think about that for next week, right? Maybe we'll speak a little bit about that next week.
Awesome. Well, Rabbi, I appreciate everything you share. I think today's been a great class.
So next week it's going to be part 14 because we didn't even get to half the things I wanted to get to. So next week again will be chapter 2, Mishnah 6, part 14.
There you go. So we're going to have a part 14 with Mishnah. We're in chapter 2, Mishnah 6 for those looking for reference. Rabbi's been going at it fast and furious. I haven't caught up all the uploads onto the Roku station, so I've only got the first dozen or so that they've played several times already on the Roku station since we went live there. But this has been our first live broadcast. I'll be coming up shortly next half an hour with Rabbi Aaron David Poston's 40 or Beyond the 7 class. So please stick around for that. But Rabbi Coffman, thank you. So Hashem willing, we're back next week, same time, and on all these stations. So we hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week.
Crown means Mashiach. It's all kinds of stuff. I'm not going to get into all that stuff. This is so what happened is, it was to the point that a lot of people were really getting involved, and these things have usually caused serious problems whenever it's happened, and it's been disappointed. Always happens. We can go. That's happened. So there was a very famous rabbi called Eliezer from Jikov, very, very, very big rabbi, and what happened is, on the last day of Sukkot, he got up and said, I swear Mashiach is not coming this year. The beginning of the year. I swear Mashiach is coming. Everybody was flabbergasted. How can you do that? So they asked him, why did you do this? He said, listen, I believe Mashiach can come every day.